Giants aren't rational. Not when it comes to biology, where every centimeter a lifeform gains means a mad battle against gravity, heat, circulation. Yet humans have always been obsessed with extremes of size, in nature and, when nature falls short, in our wildest imaginations. Because surely there is a maximum, the largest lifeform possible, and it's time we find the limit. Okay, so there is a problem. A few problems, actually, and we'll be covering them all, but the most immediate is the issue of mass. Though as a Godzilla-obsessed child, I would have once told you that the only reason there aren't more giant creatures is because nature is a coward, today I understand that if one tries to create the largest life form by simply increasing the size of an existing animal, said animal will likely explode. This has to do with the square cube law, a quirk of mathematics that means an object's volume increases faster than its surface area, which causes a host of issues for the biggest animals. To illustrate, imagine if you had 13 times more skin. Sounds like a lot of skin? Well, such is the life of an elephant, as their surface area is around 13.1 times greater than ours. But that means their volume is almost 60 times greater. Suddenly, all that extra skin barely sounds like enough. Indeed, since the epidermis is how animals release heat, elephants scarcely have sufficient exterior to release the heat produced by their gargantuan interior, hence why they're so fond of baths and need big old ears designed to dispel warmth. Size is an exponential convection oven. Temperatures only increase the bigger you get. Yet while being cooked alive by physics is a major reason why nature hasn't produced skyscraper-sized land animals, heat isn't the most obvious danger of increasing mass. That would be the risk of pulverized bones, because some sort of skeleton has to hold up all that snowballing weight, and while smaller animals can get away with proportionally smaller bones, larger animals of course require larger skeletons, and there's a point where the math stops mathing. Sauropod dinosaurs with their hollow bones cheated for as long as they could, but even still, it seems like somewhere around 120 tons, a species' leg bones would have to become so thick to support their bodies that they literally couldn't take a single step. Okay, so these are pretty fundamental constraints on the maximum size of a life form. Constraints we will be doing our best to get around later in this video. Yet I remember when I was younger, I kind of didn't believe they existed in the first place. Part of that disbelief came from the fact that I wanted giant monsters to be real, so any talk of restrictions was almost blasphemous. But another part came from the fact that, when my eyes wandered over the tops of buildings and into the vast sky, the image of a colossal creature looming upon that horizon felt so close, like I was grasping at the ghost of something real. In my defense, it's not like there haven't been giant land animals, and I'm hardly the first person to obsess over them. In the paleontology community, there has long been a focused and, indeed, somewhat unscientific drive to determine the largest dinosaur species. People are captivated by entities that push the limits. Indeed, here's an opportunity to take our first crack at modeling a contender for the largest possible life form. If we imagine a sauropod that adopted a semi-sessile lifestyle to the point where walking was no longer a major concern, we might be envisioning the largest scientifically possible land animal. And while I have no artistic talent to bring such a species to life, I do have MS Paint in a dream. Our Juggernautosaurus is a decent first attempt at envisioning the closest thing nature could make to a kaiju, but as it approaches 120 tons, it would probably need to be semi-aquatic. Which brings us to the reason that even larger species than sauropods have historically been found in Earth's oceans. The buoyancy of liquid plus water's ability to function as a natural coolant means life in the deep has never faced the same limits as life on land. So an oceanic creature might be our best bet for a record breaker, but there are still limitations. While mass isn't the major problem when it comes to whales and the extinct giants of the past, food is still a significant roadblock. Even with a slow metabolism, every animal on Earth must eat to power their cells, and larger animals have a lot more cells, meaning they need that much more food to meet their energy demands. Baleen whales are basically all mouth, and have literal clouds of docile krill that they can swim directly into, but blue whales are still so ludicrously gigantic that if they don't eat around 8.4 elephants worth of krill a week, they're at risk of starving. So while mass-wise we could have way larger aquatic species, evolutionarily, growing beyond the size of a whale typically isn't worth the greatly increased probability of going hungry. But again, when I was younger, I would not accept this, even going as far as to make my first grade science project an attempt to prove there were creatures in the deep ocean longer than the blue whale. I had a conviction that somewhere in the abyssal trenches of the ocean, there must be Leviathans that exceeded all science could imagine, even if I couldn't tell you what they were eating. I had some tangential evidence. Ribbon worms, a kind of aquatic invertebrate, can reach a shocking 180 feet or 55 meters, genuinely longer than any whale species. Though I didn't like how these worms were so much skinnier than your average whale, nor how their most impressive records of length were somewhat unsubstantiated, I still felt they were proof that undersea life could grow far larger than we knew. Later, I latched onto accounts of siphonophores, which have been recorded at almost 400 feet or 120 meters long. The caveat being that such life forms are in fact thousands of smaller life forms working together, which, while cool, also felt like cheating. Young me didn't want some thin, unsubstantiated technicality to unseat the whale. I wanted a Leviathan that was solid, immutable, physical. And I don't think I am alone in this desire, if the popularity of giant underwater creature animations on YouTube is to be believed. Some titanic serpent in the ocean's depths feels right in the same way a Colossus looming over a skyline does. It feels like it should exist. Today, I do think siphonophores deserve a fair shot when it comes to envisioning the largest hypothetical life form. While it's true they're technically a colony of individual units, under the right circumstances, a siphonophore could evolve truly eldritch proportions, making them worthy of consideration. I could see them either becoming the longest species in the sea by far, or becoming massive city-like entities rooted to a single spot, feeding on either photosynthesis or geothermal energy. That second option for the largest possible siphonophore, which we can call Siphonophora gigantea, is pretty close to the vent gardens from the game Subnautica. Giant clonal organisms that get all their energy from plants growing within their transparent bodies. Siphonophores are indeed one of the more plausible paths to creating the type of building-sized organisms you see in works like Subnautica. And yet despite this, most of the Leviathans in that game and other forms of media are solid flesh and blood creatures. In fact, I seldom hear the vent gardens mentioned when it comes to discussions of the largest creatures in Subnautica's oceans. They almost don't count. Here again is that subconscious desire for record-setting giants to be material. And I can, of course, relate. Because while child me didn't want to hand the trophy to siphonophores, to accept that the blue whale was indeed the largest animal on record felt like admitting defeat. The truth is, I don't think our minds are very good at comprehending how big a regular whale can grow. For centuries, humans literally could not fathom a whale in its totality. The Leviathan's inaccurate depictions in art reflecting the fact that sailors could only catch glimpses of the creatures, or find isolated, colossal fragments that washed ashore. Whales were simply too vast to be copied down all at once. They had to be taken in piecemeal, and still it feels like the raw enormity of the creatures were lost in translation. Even today, I'm not convinced we can really grasp a whale's size through out-of-context video clips. Though much has been written on whale falls, how when these giants die at sea, their bodies form miniature ecosystems, vanishingly little has been written on the impact of a whale's remains washed ashore. To see the bones of a whale next to more familiar land animals is, to me, a startling reminder of just how much my brain continues to underestimate their true scale. This is not to say we can't design an aquatic lifeform larger than a whale. Though a physically singular Leviathan could probably never surpass the length of the largest possible siphonophore colony, such a creature would very likely have a greater total mass, which is the most common benchmark for the somewhat nebulous concept of size. If we envision an ideal ocean ecosystem with unheard of amounts of consistently available food, we could have oceanic creatures several orders of magnitude larger than the largest whale species. These mega whales would be limited only by their need to circulate oxygen and their ability to move in the direction of food. They'd be true titans, and there's another trick we'll get to later that could make them even bigger. But the question is, would we be able to appreciate their vastness? Shortcomings in our ability to comprehend scale is one of the major obstacles in imagining the largest lifeform possible. Not a problem with physics, but a problem with our perception. The human sense of proportion struggles greatly to accept the size of giants, at least without something familiar to give us context. And even with a point of reference, our brains can be easily misled. For instance, these are not photos of miniature objects. They're photos of regular-sized objects next to a giant coin, created by two Norwegian artists. But even knowing this, even seeing the coin itself being built, my brain still struggles to accept that I'm not looking at something tiny. On the flip side, the sculptor Robert Therian has created massive versions of ordinary desks and chairs, sculptures that, while impressive, are impossible to appreciate without the reference of someone standing next to them. And even still, there's a weird irrational part of my brain that tells me the people are small and the furniture is ordinary. Our mental measuring tapes are predispositioned to miscalculations, a fact that movies have used for decades to trick audiences into believing various size-warping special effects. A man in a monster suit is only as tall as a man until you stick them on a set full of waist-high buildings. Errors in humans' internal scope assessors can be a source of entertainment, but I also think they can genuinely mislead us in terms of the raw gigantism of certain species. At least for me, my eyes don't even always process size comparison charts for large animals properly. Logically, I'm aware that the little human figure in images like this one is meant to represent a full-size person, and yet again, there's an instinctual part of my brain that doesn't go, wow, that's a big animal, but wow, that's a really tiny person. So while it would be cool to make our mega whales even bigger, and we could do so by imagining a stage in their life where they give up swimming altogether to become giant sessile filter feeders, almost like giant sea anemones, if such behemoths existed, would we be able to process their size? It might sound unimportant, but I remember spending hours watching those creature size comparison videos on YouTube, hell, I still watch those videos, and feeling surprised by the actual length of various fictional monsters. Lots of creatures felt bigger on screen due to the filmmaker's effective use of reference and framing, whereas other supposed titans felt smaller because they existed in a visual vacuum with nothing to compare them to. A poor sense of scale can make a creature less than the sum of its canonical total length. A recent example can be seen with the alien whales in the Avatar films, creatures that are supposedly way bigger than regular whales, but whose vastness is strangely hard to parse. This is because, for most of the film, the whales only interact with the headlining blue alien people, who themselves are way bigger than humans, a fact I had to keep reminding myself of to adjust my sense of proportions. To be clear, this issue is not a criticism of the film, but more criticism of the occipital lobe, but the difficulty remains. How do we train our minds to appreciate the scale of a colossus? The closest I've ever come to understanding the true impact of a Leviathan was when, for that first grade science experiment, I measured out a heap of yarn to the length of the longest blue whale. 110 feet or 34 meters. In other words, a lot of yarn. The final product was beyond unwieldy. It would knot and tangle, coiling like monstrous intestines. The only place I could fully unroll the mass was in the woods, and while I expected it to be long, obviously, even if I maintained there were larger creatures than whales, what I didn't expect was for it to be cosmically horrifying. Following the length of that yarn, I for the first time appreciated the unfiltered scope of a giant. I remember having nightmares that night of monsters coiling in the deep, emerging from the same dark infinity that the yarn disappeared into. It might sound strange to pursue the dream of the largest possible life form all the way into Lovecraftian horror, but I think that intrinsic, irrational human desire to be awed by record-breaking sizes does, strangely, demand a little fear. There are a few real yet unmentioned life forms that, to me, find that ideal balance between reverence and terror. I think of the fungal colony in Oregon's Blue Mountains, a 2,300-acre mass growing beneath the dirt, its body stretching some 1,600 football fields. Though arguably not just one life form, there's an equally strong case that this is the single largest organism on Earth. Another case could be made for Pando, a vast stretch of aspen trees in Utah, with all 47,000 clonal trunks connected to the same root system. We could follow this logic to envision a continent, or even planet-spanning life form, a hypothetical species of plant or fungus that, on an alien world with ideal conditions, could overtake the entire surface. To me, such an organism feels both terrifying and, like the siphonophores, a teeny bit like cheating. A planet-wide fungal network is a good consolation prize for the largest possible life form, yet my inner child still demands a creature that's a little more traditional. If we're willing to go even further with breaking the rules, it's possible we could finagle our way to a Godzilla after all, or even something larger. We discussed before that the weight limit for land animals seems to be around 120 tons due to leg bone density, but that's based on the assumption that the animal has 4 legs. Could an 8-legged animal exist that could grow to effectively double the size? Honestly, we don't know, in part because there aren't any large or even medium-sized vertebrates with 8 legs to compare it to, making it unclear if a giant 8-legged species could be evolutionarily effective at all. Are the lack of such body plans an immutable law of nature, or a byproduct of the fact that all terrestrial megafauna is descended from the same 4-limbed ancestor? And could there be a Colossus with more than 8 legs? Could we see one with 10 or 100? We honestly aren't certain if millipede-esque titans thundering across the land on countless limbs is theoretically possible or not. Physics-wise, there would definitely be some hurdles, but there are some pretty major hurdles in the way of human locomotion too, and we are out there running. So while we're considering different body plans, we should also consider different body materials. In the same way that with the right materials you can build a 100-meter tall building, with the right biomaterials making up their skeleton, a species could support considerably more weight. And even more significantly, weight is relative. On a planet with weaker surface gravity, you could get way larger organisms with some pretty wild body plans. And since we're looking to maximize, well, there's no gravity in space. The cosmic vacuum isn't easy to survive in, true, but some animals have managed it. If our species had the right outer shell, a stellar colossus could call space home, assuming it had a way to get around and collect energy. Enter the solar sail, a propulsion technology that through clever physics can both absorb sunlight and use solar pressure to propel itself. If we imagine a creature made out of a protected central body and a vast biological solar sail, we could be looking at a species unrestrained from any issues of gravity and energy. Though easily the most out there concept, this cosmic deity might indeed be the single largest life form we can come up with. Now we just need 1,000-some meter length of yarn to get the full effect. In the end, maybe no Leviathan could fully satisfy us. For every infinity, there's always infinity and one. I think I understood this on some level when I was younger, though it didn't help with my dissatisfaction towards the giants that nature had given me. And maybe that's just human instinct. We seem to be, as a species, unable to set a record without immediately trying to break it. A desire for more is something of our birthright. But to think more optimistically, our strangely universal interest in life forms that exceed all records could be attributed to humans' place in the universe. The truth is, humans are pretty enormous already compared to most life on Earth. Scientifically, we're absolutely considered megafauna. And just think, there are billions upon billions of organisms living inside each of our bodies. To a microorganism, our skin and hair is an eldritch forest. Humans are, depending on one's perspective, already colossi. So while we might dream of space whales, titans that could overwhelm our minds the same way we could overwhelm a bacterium, regular whales are already cosmically overwhelming. We just have to adjust our perspective. And speaking of adjusting perspectives, I want to show you something. Right now, I have a full second video all about calculating the smallest possible life form. It's funny, physics-breaking, full of unexpected twists and turns. It's also not what I want to show you. I have like 10 other bonus videos on strange gods and sentient octopuses, on aliens and dragons. I'm talking over 2 hours of polished, curious archive goodness, all stuff you've never seen before on this channel. But that's also not what I want to show you. I want to show you that Nebula, the streaming platform where all these videos are ready and waiting, is for a limited time offering free 3-day trials for anyone who's missed out on the fun so far. But 3 days is definitely not enough time to see all Nebula has to offer, because in addition to all my regular and exclusive videos early and ad-free, hundreds of your other favorite creators have their own exclusive early and ad-free videos. Jacob Geller has years worth of bonus videos, Tierzoo is dropping stuff weeks in advance, and there are entire shows like Jetlag for you to binge. In short, there's way more to Nebula than you can see in a few days. So thankfully, you can, as usual, get a full 40% off an annual subscription to Nebula using my link on screen or in the description, which is just $3 a month. Lately, I've been watching episodes of A Bit Obscure from the channel A Bit Frank, a new show exploring haunted spaces that's been keeping me up at night. Nebula offers both an overwhelming amount of the stuff you love, and it's the single best way to support channels like mine. So if you're a Curious Archive fan that's ever been interested in my exclusive videos, this free trial period is a great time to see what they're all about, and I hope you stick around and continue to lend your support. Also, if you're like me and a monthly or yearly subscription model isn't your thing, you can instead use my link to get an unlimited lifetime of Nebula access for a one-time payment of $300, which is a full $200 off for an account that literally never expires. And, as I always like to remind people, if you'd like to share these videos with friends or family, each Nebula subscriber automatically gets free, week-long guest passes so that friends and family can watch literally anything they want. You can also gift a month, a year, or even a lifetime of Nebula access using Nebula gift cards, just in time for the holidays. And I think that's finally everything. 40% off for exclusive early and ad-free videos, 3-day free trial period before that, and I hope to see you there. And, as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this entry, consider lending your support by liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification icon to stay up to date on all things curious. See you in the next video.